But I wanted to start today by correcting or challenging a point that was put forward by the Minister in the debate yesterday when she started to explain how the Crawley finger, as it is called, she referred to it, first came into existence, and she told the House that it was to allow barges, so barges could pull up and people could bring their goods and services into the town of Subiaco, or whatever it was called then. I did at the time challenge her on this, and I would have thought that a minister who was paying due respect to the consideration on a bill like this might have actually understood the history of this area. Because the actual, as I understand it from talking to people in the area, historians of the area, there is a very different history to how the Crawley finger, as the Minister referred to it, came into existence. And it's an interesting one that, of course, members will not be surprised to learn would have got my interest because it had something to do with trams. So the history of how this area going south from Subiaco down to the Nedlands foreshore came into existence is actually dates back to the start of the 1900s. And there was a proposal to build a tram line, an extension of the tram line at that stage that ran to Subiaco down to the Nedlands foreshore. At the time, that land was in the... actually for recreational activities more than anything else, right? And if you note something, I don't know that you take goods and services, you take people on trams. Railway lines take goods and services, Minister, as you would have remembered the history of the Fremantle. I mean, I know the Liberal Party doesn't care too much about railways, but the history of the railway line from Fremantle to Perth was one of the early lines. The history of the construction... So the history of how this land came into existence was that they wanted to extend the tramways from Subiaco down to the Nedlands foreshore. At the time, that land fell within the Claremont Roads Board, which is now the City of Nedlands, and they were not a particularly wealthy council, unlike some might think they are today. And so they could not help finance it, because in those days local governments actually helped finance the railway systems. And so the City of Subiaco, who were a more financially sound council at the time, in a far stronger financial position, actually agreed to fund or assist in the funding of the Subiaco Corridor, as I think the people of Subiaco would prefer it to be called. They agreed to help fund the construction of the tramway down to the Nedlands foreshore in return for the annexation of the area through which the tram ran. Now, of course, it involved the construction of what is now known as Broadway, which in fact on one side that was annexed, and on the other side it was left within what is now the City of Nedlands, the former Claremont Roads Board area. I think one of the most amazing things is if you go into that area to this day, the street names, if you look at the street names that are around that tram line, they are actually named after former members of the Claremont Roads Board, not members of the City of Subiaco. Now that is a sign of magnanimous behaviour by local government councillors or people in the political field. Something that you would imagine if you saw that sort of magnanimous behaviour today from people like the Minister on the other side of this chamber. Sorry? I'm happy to go through. There's a whole range of them. Not really, but there is. I think there's already a name after the Travers family in Australind, so
yes.
Not related to me.
Order members.
I'm happy to go through it with the member at another time, but there is a range of the streets that go, if you go back through the history of the streets that sit around, particularly in that area between Nedlands, between UWA and Broadway, a number of... What? Well, I'm sure there was probably, except there wouldn't have been women on the council in those days. I'm sure there's... yes, anyway, I will move on. I won't be distracted. So it was about expanding the tram system, and the tram system was about actually moving people into the city, but it also provided a connection for recreational purposes down at what was then the Netherlands Baths, in fact. So that's the actual history. So in fact, the two interesting things about that story, I think probably three interesting things. One, local government was helping contribute to the cost of building trams. Two, it was probably the first example of value capture in Western Australia, where a council agreed to actually help fund the construction of the tramway in return for getting that land annexed to them so they could then collect the rates off that new area that would be opened up as a result of that land. So a land capitalisation process or value capture in terms of the construction of public transport in Western Australia. Issues that we still talk about today. And so it is a history, in fact, that the reason that land became a part of the city of Subiaco in the first instance was because they paid for it. They actually made a contribution, and that's why they got that land. I don't know of any other piece of land in Western Australia where the city has come to have that land in its boundaries because they made a financial contribution to a piece of infrastructure. Sorry? No, they contributed to as I understand the story, as it's been told to me, is that they made a contribution to the construction of the light rail, but in return they got that land included in their borders because there was an expectation that it would open up that land for housing, and then that the rates that would be driven out of that land would then go to the city of Subiaco. And so it was a commercial decision. It was a commercial decision. As you know, the Honourable Simon O'Brien, I think the original draft of the public transport plan for Perth in 2031, the July 2011 version, remember that? That talked about the issues of value capture and those sort of things in it, and never went anywhere, but they were talked about. So there is a long history, and it is not a simple issue. It is, and that's why, even to this day, even though the trams sadly are long gone, why there is a long history that we should be respectful in this place when discussing a bill of this matter. I did want to also, I did want to get on the record, there is a long and interesting history to how this land, it's not some sort of simple aberration that occurred with strange boundaries. There was actually a reason, and a reason that involved the city of Subiaco putting up money to make this all happen. Now, that's not an argument not to have change, but it is an argument to say that there should be a lot more respect having been shown in terms of developing that change. I think that it's also worth going through some of the other issues in terms of the mismanagement of this bill.